Hey, what is going on everybody, and welcome to Fantasia. For today, we're going to be jumping into another session of Epic 7 out today. Got another tier list for you guys. Now, I know it's been quite a while since we've done an RTA tier list. So here we are here with the end of the summer season coming to a close in the next few weeks. And you guys have been requesting a tier list to help you guys pick units to build, and especially with the upcoming Epic Dash event, units to be selecting from, right? From the limited selectors, 5-star selectors, and all that good stuff. So we're going to jump into this here, but first we need a breakdown of the tiers. Keeping this relatively simple here, right? The first tier is going to be the SSS tier, essentially the pick or ban, right? You either pick them first when you go first pick, or they're like the first 2 units you pick when you go second, or they're the units you literally just pre-ban because you don't want to fight them at all. The next tier is going to be the core picks. These are units that typically people tend to build their teams around. It's not necessarily saying they must be in your core teams, but they're very, very common picks that you should be prioritizing building to have available to you, but also make sure that you're ready to fight. A tier is going to be the counter picks or the late picks here. These are like the 4th or 5th picks in the draft. These units are usually pretty good into very specific team comps and stuff, right? And they do show up relatively often, but not so common that they're going to be like a core pick or anything that you're going to be focusing a draft around entirely. The B tier is going to be situational units, things that I've seen pop up from time to time, and any unit that I haven't really encountered this season, I haven't seen really do anything by spectating Emperor Legend matches or experiencing them myself. Otherwise, they're not going to be included in the tier list to save us some time and some space. But let's go ahead and now jump into this here, starting with the SSS tier. These are gonna encompass things like Lady of the Scales. Those of you guys who've been playing the game for a while, you know how insanely busted she is with all the damage sharing that she gives. And essentially, if you see a Lady of the Scales drafted, and anticipate an aggro or cleave team, she provides so much protection for these squishy units that it's almost impossible for you to take out before they take you out, right? So she's definitely going to be up there for one of the most annoying units in the game. Second is going to be Notos. Keep in mind, these units are no particular order, but I figured with the SSS tier, I might as well put them in a order that kind of makes sense from most annoying to least annoying, right? So we have things like Notos here, who's basically an auto win button. You have to control him. You have to make sure he skips his turn, whether it's through stuns or sleeps or RNG through fear, maybe increasing his skill cooldowns and stuff. Just prevent him from taking a turn, or just get rid of him early. Nuke him down with a unit that has extinction, because he usually has Holy Sacrifice to give him a second chance to maybe take a turn. Once he takes a turn, the match is usually, like, I'd say 9.9 times out of 10, it's over. You just lost, right? So definitely an auto win button for sure. Next up is going to be Boss Arunka. She is still up here as like one of the best knights in the entire game. The fact that she doesn't let you target anybody in the backline, not only for attacks, but for things like Salome, right? Being able to copy your units and stuff. Boss Arunka says no to that. You protect everyone in the backline, and she is really, really good for a lot of openers, because if you have a Boss Arunka here on your side of the field, you don't have to worry about things like Zeo potentially taking a first turn, pushing back your openers and all that stuff, right? If you're picking a Zeo, chances are they're probably banning your Boss Arunka if you have other speed contesters, right? Otherwise, they're going to kind of struggle to navigate around her. Next up, we have Perfumer Bibulus. This is a unit that has been carrying me quite a bit this season. You guys know I love picking that Perfumer Bibulus because she is one of the few like true anti-cleave units in the game, in my opinion. Just all that damage reflecting that you'll be putting onto your opponent. The amount of debuff she carries makes her super versatile, right? She can't strip buffs, but the redirected provoke she has, along with the venoms and detonation, make her really powerful. One, in terms of controlling units, but two, also really debilitating the HP scaling bruisers and stuff out there. She also has a defense break on her skill 1. You can soul burn to dual attack. She's just a lot of utility for so many different team comps, and it's why she's prioritized as a first pick pretty much in all circumstances, right? These are all units that you really don't want to deal with if you have a chance to not. Next up is going to be RNL. RNL is relatively new, but man, have they been making a splash on the meta. They are absolutely insane for control pulling Perfumer Bibulus, for example. The bind on their skill 2 is a really underrated part of their kit. Yeah, you take extra turns, defense break, do a lot of damage, have fear and stuff. But RNL's bind is really strong into things like Perfume Bibulus, good into things like Bossa Runka, great into things like Estelle. You just prevent your opponent from proccing their passives, right, when certain conditions are met. And not only that, but they're really strong solo DPSs, they have really great survivability, giving themselves large barriers and stuff. They're just insanely strong at pretty much everything in the game. A little bit of control, pretty good DPS, right? Decent debuffs and stuff as well. So yeah, they're definitely up here for one of the most annoying things that you either have to pick or you have to ban. And last but not least, I'm actually going to just kind of jump the gun here and throw Eye of the Abyss Fumier into the SSS pick or ban. I know she's not released yet at the time of this video. She'll be released in a couple of days. But just from her kit alone, and just from what she does, even if she isn't going to be that strong in RTA, what she'll do with her presence is she actually checks these two units here. Lady of the Scales needs that frontline unit to exist for the damage share, right? If you banish that frontline unit to the Shadow Realm or into the Abyss with Fumier here, you essentially shut off Lady of the Scales' entire passive, right? Same thing with Bossa Runka. If you just banish Bossa Runka into the Shadow Realm with Eye of the Abyss Fumier, there's no more protection for the backline units, and so then you can start focusing things down relatively easily. So I think even if she isn't going to be insane, right? Some units kind of fall short of expectations, I understand that, but even if she isn't going to be as insane as people think she is, she'll at least put two of the top units here in check so that they are not going to be as effective, which is a massive impact. So I'm definitely going to be putting her up here for now. We'll see how she performs later on in the preseason and in the upcoming season, right? So moving on to the S tier picks, okay? These are the core picks here that a lot of people like to center their drafts around. We're going to start off with a bunch of aggressive options. Things like Zio, right? For taking first turn, guaranteed, carries a bunch of souls with his Tag Hell's Ancient Book. Just an overall fantastic unit that combos well with so many other units out there. Briarwitch Assyria, also a fantastic opener, defense break, that's AoE. She has extra hit chance to attack these evasion units that are running around the meta right now, and she also has Unbuffable, which is huge against all these units that want to put up buffs and things on their team, whether defensive or offensive. And the fact that she also has a passive that has Extinction, that prevents reviving, counters things like Holy Sacrifice on Notos, Arbiter Vildrids, and all that good stuff, is also absolutely invaluable. So Briarwitch definitely deserves a spot up here. Now, next up is going to be Swift Flagbearer Sigrid, a unit that's a bit more flexible than Briarwitch in most cases, because you can pick her outside the ban protection slot. You can use her as a really great unit to open up against slower players, right? Her fear, her target debuff, her ability to dual attack with like everyone on your entire team is just such strong utility, and the fact that she turn cycles so quickly, she has built-in protection with evasion, means that she's kind of difficult to counter with things like Zio, for example. You have to get really lucky. Even RNL has like a chance to miss when you're trying to snipe that Swift Flagbearer Sigrid. And so because of that uncertainty with her, no one really tends to contest her. And so yeah, she definitely deserves a spot up here. Very, very strong against slower teams, against slower players, to the point where slower players and slower teams tend to pick her just so the opponent can pick her. It also brings a bit of tempo to your team as well. Next up is going to be Rinnoc, still a fantastic unit up here in the core picks because fixed damage right now is just super strong against so many teams. And Rinnoc, the ability to pilfer and steal your opponent's stats and then to inflict a bunch of fixed damage to everybody, still super strong, especially with damage sharing being so good with Estelle. With a well-timed Rinnoc and maybe a little bit of follow-up damage or maybe some preemptive damage before she goes, can easily nuke down a tank, right? And makes her really potent. Forces the opponent to answer her. That's the main thing. If you let a Rinnoc go unchecked, if you're playing a relatively slow team, you're going to get lapped, you're going to get absolutely destroyed, right? So definitely something to look out for. Next is a unit that I personally really hate fighting against, and it's Freerin. She is one of my personal pre-bans for the season, and she is just such a powerful DPS. The fact that she takes no damage whatsoever as long as you have 4 souls is crazy, right? And she is one of the reasons why a lot of people have been building a lot of fixed damage to kind of bypass her protection from the direct attacks. So Frieren is definitely up here with insane damage. She has self-buffing immunity, which covers her main weakness of being sealed and stuff. She also has her own attack buffs and things, so she's a very self-sufficient damage dealer with protection and everything. You can see Frieren band protected with like 4 Soul Weavers or like a Knight or 2 with a couple of more Soul Weavers, and she becomes pretty much untouchable in a lot of cases. So yeah, definitely a lot of people who are revolving their drafts around Frieren here. Next up, we have Arbiter Vildred, another damage dealer who got buffed and has absolutely been destroying the meta, which is insane. Really strong against light units, huge AoE damage. The fact that he has 2 lives, the fact that he is bulky, he can throw back debuffs, makes us traditional things that counter evasion, like New Moon Luna and sealing, don't really do anything against him, right? He'll throw those seals back to your team if you try to hit him, especially if he evades, and his evasion is not tied to a passive, is all incredibly great for him. He does have quite a few counters though in the meta. You know, things like Briar Witch Assyria, for example, definitely hard checks him here, and other units that have either built-in protection to not take as much damage, like Spirit Eye Selene and Tori, or extra hit chance, such as Tori. So Spirit Eye Selene is definitely up here as a core pick because reviving is so strong in this game, it's almost busted. Spirit Eye Selene made Chloe, Ruel, like all these units that can just loop and revive each other over and over again. And the fact that she provides immortality for protection for the team, the fact that she can Soulburn to deal extra damage, take extra turns to turn cycle even faster, means that she has a lot of burst potential, she has a lot of tempo that she provides to your team, and she has a lot of protection as well. So she is definitely earning her spot up here as a core pick, and she's been here for quite a while too. Next up is Tori. Tori, as I mentioned, has extra hit chance. She is huge with burst damage. She doesn't require Souls of Soulburn as long as she gets a Cascade buff. And the fact that she is immune, as long as you have an immunity set on her, she'll start the match with immunity. None of her buffs can be dispelled, which means she is untouchable by debuffs at the start of the match. She is another reason, along with Spirit Eye Selene, why fixed damage is so popular right now, because it deals with these 2 units relatively easily. But yeah, Tori still earns this place up here for being great counter into things like Arbiter Vildred, fantastic unit with the Cascade buff to even deal fixed damage herself against other units, especially evasion units, right? Like ML Bologna and Setsuka, Tori can check relatively easily by herself. Next up is another damage dealer, but one that's kind of unconventional. Salome here has actually a lot of utility, not only because you can copy your units, not only because you can dual attack with all of your highest attack units whenever you want, without a Soulburn, without any other conditions, but the fact that your skill 3 inflicts collapse and defense break, you can Soulburn to ignore resistance, and you deal fixed damage proportional to your HP, which is insane because, like we mentioned, this is a great way to kind of burst down things like Frieren, Spirit Eye Selene. If you attack into them and you put the collapse on them, it cuts their max health in half, and these units all relatively are really squishy, right? So Salome can come in, collapse your units, and then attack them. That fixed damage will easily finish them off because they'll only at that point have about 3.5, 4k HP at that point, and then they're just gonna evaporate, right? So Salome is absolutely amazing, and the fact that you can copy things like Nurse Yoha, Ruel, Spirit Eye Selene to just put more revives onto your team is also absolutely crazy stuff. So definitely up here as a core pick unit. Next up is going to be Setsuka. So speaking of evasion, right? Setsuka's super, super strong. The fact that she can single-handedly win you matches, you guys have seen me fight just a single Setsuka on the other team along with a few other, hodgepodge units. I will just miss every single attack. 30% chance to miss on any given attack is huge. You have a 1 in 3 chance of missing and then getting absolutely punished by her attacks, her counter attacks. It's insane. And the fact that there's so little that you can actually do to prevent this, things like Swift Flagbearer, Sigrid, things like Briar Witch Assyria can increase your hit chance or put fear so she can't counter, is great. But yeah, there's nothing inherently stopping her from doing her shenanigans, especially because she's on Repose set. Even if you do seal her, her artifact gives her a 20% chance to evade, so it's a 1 in 5 chance for you to miss an attack on her and for her to punish you again. So yeah, absolutely crazy unit here, and synergizes with so many teams. She's like a panic button too for so many teams. If you're losing in draft, throw Setsuka in, and chances are, you might actually come really close to winning for no reason other than RNG. Alright, next up we have another newer unit, Abad Ludwig, going to be in here because, well, evasion is really good right now, and his entire kit kind of dumpsters on evasion, dealing fixed damage whether or not he hits or misses, and the fact that he is so strong with the block debuff. Before that, it was just Witch's Mirror, Tenebria, and Brigitte that had it. Witch's Mirror, Tenebria being the first AoE one. Abad Ludwig putting block, putting silence down as well, making him almost like a better version of Witch's Mirror, Tenebria in some cases, right? Super insanely strong because he attacks a bunch of damage too. Just really annoying for slower players like me, personally. But yeah, he's been making quite a splash in the meta as of late. Alright, next up we have Estelle, one of the best knights in the game right now, the top 2, tied with, well, I wouldn't say tied with Boss Arunca, but Estelle is one of the reasons I would put Boss Arunca up here, because Estelle just provides that 40% damage share, and it keeps Boss Arunca alive for so long, especially if there's a tanky Boss Arunca in the front lines. Yeah, that Estelle is going to be keeping everyone on the team alive. Not only does she do a bunch of counterattacks, she punishes your team, she cleanses herself, she provides injury onto your opponent, so if they're playing bruisery stuff, you can definitely win in a grind game in the long run, right? And the fact that she gains fighting spirit so quickly, and she gets barriers, massive barriers for your team, is also incredibly good. Pairs really well with things like Tori as a DPS, pairs really well with Perfumer Biblis, especially because right now there is a warfare rule that allows you to have 25% damage reduction if you're an RGB unit. Things like Estelle, things like Perfumer Biblis become so much more tankier and incredibly difficult to deal with. Next up, we have Unbound Knight Arwell. If you cannot get the Estelle or the Boss Arunca if your opponent picks 2 of them together, second pick tends to pick Boss Arunca and Estelle together, Unbound Knight Arwell is actually a pretty decent backup option, right? Has the same 40% damage share as Estelle because of her buff that she provides herself, the escort buff, and Arwell by herself packs quite a bit of utility, barriers, defense buffs, basically a full-on Estelle, but with no damage. You're more of a team player and less of a damage dealer, right? So she's definitely incredibly good. I built her up recently myself, and I've been using her and seeing great results. Next up, we have Disciplinary Prefect Arya. I'm going to throw her in here as one of the bulkier units that you can be using as a DPS. A really great bruiser, probably one of the best in the current meta right now. Really great superhumanization target. Super good because it prevents your opponent from soul burning by doubling their soul burn cost. So if they only pick like a single mage like Zio or something, you can throw Arya in and it kind of shuts them down. We also have things like Bellion, shutting down soul burns entirely by preventing your opponent from generating souls or having souls at the start of the match, so super nice. Important to note that Ludwig does kind of bypass the Bellion, so even though Bellion's a decent counter pick into him, if you can't finish him off soon enough, Bellion will eventually fall. She is easily countered by some things though, things like Arbiter Vildred, things like Lone Crescent Bellona, which we'll get to later. But yeah, Bellion still deserves her spot up here because she can actually be a very good DPS carry. Personally, I play a really slow, 0 speed, 200 effect res Bellion, but a lot of people, the meta right now is playing a super fast Bellion. Maybe some effectiveness, but at least 30k health, 200 something speed. Just take turns, lap your opponent, keep throwing 3F damage out there, and that fixed damage from 3F, super strong into things like Freerin, Spirit Eye Celine, Tori, just a lot of the units in the current meta right now. And that damage also applies, because it's an artifact, it applies on miss as well, so when you're attacking things that have evasion, you still will be able to chip them down. Next up, we have units I've been mentioning already, but Ruel and School Nurse Yolha, both absolutely disgusting units. One, to just pair up with knights like Arwell, Estelle, and Boss Arunca, but two, to pair up with Salome, because Salome can just copy these units and then let you keep reviving and putting up invincibility on the team, or damage limit buffs with Ruel, or superhumanizing them with Nurse Yolha, doubling their max HP or their speed, making them absolutely crazy units here to pair up with Disciplinary Prefect Arya and Bellion as well, because Nurse with the superhumanization increases Bellion's 3F damage, but her superhumanization also helps with Disciplinary Prefect Arya, allowing her to basically one-shot like anything in the game, almost. She can basically even one-shot like Boss Aruncas in a lot of cases if they're more on the defense side and less on the HP side, because there's a 60k HP Arya that scales off of her HP stat for damage that's just going to be punching you in the face. So next up, we have the A tier here with the counter picks and the late picks. We're going to start off with a couple of faster picks here. These are units I don't have personal experience with because I don't play really fast, but I throw Ahmed and Brigitte here because both of these units are very good with Frieren, right? They complement her really well. Ahmed providing the skill null, providing the CR pushing, greater attack buff, crit damage buff. Brigitte also that greater attack buff, the block on your opponent, preventing them from moving with bind as well. Synergizes really well with just Frieren trying to deal damage while not being like counterattacked herself. Typically, if you're playing Frieren, you're playing aggressively. Picking these units late means that your opponent's probably picking really slow, bulky counter units, and so they provide a lot of protection to the Frieren while advancing your goal of just trying to cleave. Next up is going to be Ahmed, a fantastic counter pick into Harsetti. She is a very late pick, not something that you'd really pick just because. She does provide immunity if your opponent takes first turn, though, 3-turn immunity buff actually, so she is really good in certain circumstances, but mostly against Harsetti, she's one of your go-tos to kind of punish your opponent. Elena is also going to be up here. Really good unit for AoE attacks. So if your opponent's picking something like Briarwitch Assyria, Elena can come in and just cleanse your team, put up an invincibility buff for everybody with an effect res buff, and she kind of just allows your team to survive that like crucial first turn of your opponent's like cleave. So yeah, definitely going to be a pretty decent counter pick, right? Next up is going to be Infinite Horizon Acades. Now you're going to notice that Infinite Horizon Acades is here because she's a good cleanser, and cleansers mostly have fallen off in the metagame. You'll notice then in the top 2 tiers, there's like no cleansers, despite so many debuffers with Briarwitch, Swift Flagbear, Sigrid, RNL, right, and all these other shenanigans up there. But she's one of those units that actually does really well because she turn cycles herself, she pushes herself up, you can build her with insanely good resistance too, and the fact that she has the ability to push up one of your allied units or even stealth them depending on the EE that you're running, and the fact that she can change all these debuffs into buffs on your team makes her really a strong unit that a lot of people will kind of hold off on their debuffs while she's there and try to find an optimal turn cycle to kind of use the debuffs when Infinite Horizon Acades is further back, or they're going to try to nuke her down really early. But again, couple her with things like Bossarunka, Estelle, and stuff, and you're pretty good to go in terms of survivability. Next up is going to be Ivana, a unit I didn't really think was going to be good, but then I started using her, and oh my god, guys, is she good into things like Lady of the Scales, into Spirit Eye Celine, and Ivana is actually one of the reasons why Shepherd of the Dark Diane just doesn't really exist in the meta anymore, right? You'll notice that Shepherd of the Dark Diane, if I were to make a tier list maybe of like last season or earlier on the season, Shepherd of the Dark Diane would have been like a core pick, like super high up here in the tier list, but Ivana's presence is kind of making her drop out and become almost irrelevant. So I think that's going to be about the same with Eye of the Abyss Fumir, right? Kind of hoping that it'll drop Lady of the Scales and Bossarunka out of like just this pick or ban phase up here. So yeah, Ivana is definitely top tier unit for countering these type of immortality units, right? Providing you that 50% damage reduction for your team, allowing you to ignore damage sharing with her skill 3, immunity buffing as well. You can build her relatively fast with high resistance, so pretty good. Next up is going to be Bunny Dom. Yeah, I did not expect her to be this good after her initial buffs that she got earlier in the year. She has definitely come a long way, and man, with every single unit release, she becomes better and better. At first, you know, we thought, oh, it's to counter something like Rinnock. Take an extra turn, you get a skill nullifier and a skill effect nullifier, basically stopping Rinnock from dealing damage to your units with the splash damage and everything, because you'll take the extra turns. But then you realize that Bunny Dom's actually really good against Tori, who skill 3 is to take an extra turn before she soul burns and attacks into you. Spirit Eye Celine can't use her free soul burn at the start unless they can one-shot that Bunny Dom, but typically she's well protected and insulated, right? So if they can't one-shot you, you're gonna get that all those buffs and protections for your entire team. So a little soft check to that as well. Soft check to RNL too, because RNL goes for a skill 2 into an extra turn for a skill 3, and so yeah, she's definitely super underrated, I think, in terms of how effective her buffs were. I don't think she's underrated as a pick right now, but definitely people, myself included, didn't think she was going to be as impactful. But yeah, this is absolutely amazing unit. Definitely have her ready. She's a 4-star, so readily available as well. Maid Chloe gonna be in here because fixed damage, as we've mentioned, is running amok, and Maid Chloe halves the amount of fixed damage that you take, which is incredibly good. Not only that, but she provides a defense buff, she provides healing, she provides revives for the team. Just an overall solid unit. The only issue is you gotta build her with quite a bit of bulk to make sure that she survives, but if you do that, she is vulnerable to debuffs, so it is kind of a balancing act as to how you kind of build her. She's also relatively slow, kind of on the speed of like Ruel, so you're not going to be super fast like a Nurse Yoha or anything. She can't really turn cycle herself with combat readiness gains like Infinite Horizon Acades, so she has some shortcomings, but against certain teams, against things like Abad Ludwig, for example, you are going to be okay. It's going to buy you a bit of time, but yeah, you definitely still need some pretty solid damage dealers on your team to make use of her fully. Next up is going to be Young Senya, another unit that, again, I feel like is kind of underutilized, at least for myself personally. Young Senya is really good because right now we have a really strong Earth DPS tank right here in the form of Estelle. So Young Senya with Estelle together is really, really powerful. You can put the Estelle in the front lines and you'll deal a ton of damage with this Young Senya there. She also punishes things like Harsetti as well, but you can also pair Young Senya to just have cleansing, to have more fixed damage. You can pair her with Freerin, with Rinok, with any other Earth unit that you really want, and she works wonders, right? Situational, a late pick for sure, not something you throw in there willy-nilly, but yeah, if your opponent's trying to pick Harsetti or stuff into you, definitely Young Senya if you don't have Aram. Okay, next up is going to be DDR, another Soul Weaver here. Fantastic, actually, for just his sleep ability. Sleep decreases evasion by 100%, and so you can attack into things like Lone Crescent Bellona, you can attack into things like Setsuka without worrying, and usually he's paired with slower teams, things like Harsetti teams and stuff, picked last and force banned. You almost never see him in matches, but when he's picked, people are probably going to be banning him because he's so effective at what he does. Next up, we have a bunch of openers, and I'm going to run through them relatively quickly. Sea Phantom Politis cuts your fighting spirit and focus gains in half, so really good against things like Setsuka, really good against things like Lone Crescent Bellona, and also provides the rage buff for more speed, pushes back the opponent, decreases their speed, strips some buffs as well, provides some dual attacks with the highest attack unit, so just a lot of good utility overall, with protection in the form of stealth at the end of every turn. New Moon Luna is going to be here with her seal, Soulburn the seal. Your opponent can't really do anything about that. The only way they can really counter it is if they're bringing cleansers, such as Infinite Horizon Acades, maybe a Nurse Yoha sometimes, right? But New Moon Luna actually really shines when you get to bring Witch of the Mirror Tenebria along too. Witch of the Mirror Tenebria allowing you to put AoE block on the opponent's team, right? So really, really powerful, along with some other debilitating debuffs and dual attacks as well. So yeah, when you have the block and you have a seal, your opponent can't cleanse the seal unless the unit can self-cleanse. So New Moon Luna actually pairs really well with Abad Ludwig, pairs really well with Witch of the Mirror Tenebria. Just this overall solid unit. Ban protecting her is really nice because you can use her against Bossarunka and Estelle teams, preventing the Estelle from damage sharing, and then the Unbuffable prevents Bossarunka from refreshing her buffs and pushing up her combat readiness as well on subsequent turns, so that's really good. But yeah, these are the group of debuffers here, joined with Fire Litica. I'm going to throw her in here. She was seeing a bit of play earlier this season, but not really as much now. The reason being that she's just a bit squishy. She kind of front loads all of her debuffs and skills, so she kind of becomes a little bit dead later on unless you can turn cycle fast enough and lap your opponents, right? Really lock them down. But what she can do is she puts a skill 2 up, she can restrict and bind people, so you can stop Perfume Ambivalence from doing shenanigans, and then you can use your skill 3, ignore res, push them back 100% combat readiness, you defense break them, so it's really strong for targeting down a specific unit. Now the issue with Litica is, again, like, she front loads everything, she kind of throws everything out there, but if you don't land those crucial debuffs on the skill 2, you're in a little bit of trouble, right? And the other thing with Litica is that she actually decreases fighting spirit and stuff with her skill 2, so it's actually pretty decent against Estelle, especially if you're against like a Estelle, like a bulkier, slower team. Pretty decent there. She pairs really well with Arbiter Vildred. She does give a team skill nullifier, so that's also nice for protecting everybody from a bit of damage. But yeah, so Litica's okay, but just not as impactful as some other units potentially out there. Pirate Captain Flan is also a unit that kind of joined the scene. I'm kind of sad that she kind of lost her identity after her balance patch update, but Pirate Captain Flan's still super good right now as a opener in some cases. Some people are building her incredibly fast. She has the same base speed as like Fire Witch Assyria, by the way, with her speedy ease. So yeah, they're definitely both pretty solid. But Pirate Captain Flan is more situational. She does provide you the ability to control teams, to control units. Not as well she used to, but still has the ability to do that. And you can use her to detonate bombs and stuff on evasion units too, making sure that you and prevent them from counterattacking and things. But Pirate Captain Flan also has a swift attack buff, so she also synergizes really well with aggressive teams, things like Freerin, units that want to just turn cycle a bunch, that gain a bunch of combat readiness and take extra turns. So yeah, pretty good aggressive unit, but not really seeing play in slower teams. Festivita, though, can go both ways. Festivita is actually really nice into things like Witch of the Mirror Tenebria, into things like Sea Phantom Politis, any unit that strips buffs, as long as they don't seal. So into New Moon Luna, probably not as good because you can't cleanse, but at the start of the turn, if Festivita doesn't have stealth, she'll full cleanse herself, and then she'll get a buff that allows her to deal an extra attack that does a ton of fixed damage proportional to her HP. Again, fixed damage, super good into like Freerin, Tori, Spirit Eye Celine, right, all that good stuff. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that she kind of sucks into evasion units because she has to hit them with that extra attack in order to deal the fixed damage. She's not like Abad Ludwig, she's not like MLK Ron, who can miss and still deal that damage. So that's kind of her shortcoming there, right? But still, overall, really decent unit into these like openers and stuff, really punishes them, especially if you have a really bulky Festivita, because her scaling for damage with her HP is actually really high. Next up is going to be Shepherd of the Dark DN. Oh my god, a fall from grace, huh? Definitely a counter pick or a late pick if your opponent isn't picking stuff like Disciplinary Prefect, Arya, Bellion, and really shutting you down. DN could be okay. Watch out for the Ivana, though. Any game with Ivana in there is definitely a no-go for Shepherd of the Dark DN. You give your opponent free damage mitigation, which is definitely not good. But another unit that has Seal, kind of like New Moon Luna, but you do rely on your team to soulburn and stuff for her to really pop off, and she is a bit more aggressive. New Moon Luna doesn't really have as much damage, more of a support unit. Shepherd of the Dark DN definitely has more damage, more utility with dual attacking and stuff. Just not seeing a great time right now ever since Ivana got released. Next up is going to be Aki. Aki is a good counter pick, or a late pick, actually, a 4th or 5th pick. If your opponent is playing relatively slow and they have units that can be really easily popped, if you have a really strong and fast Aki, you can go in there, and he could technically just 1v3 like your opponent, and just keep soul burning and popping them with burns and stuff, and yeah, he can literally just win you the game on turn 1, which is absolutely crazy stuff. We've done it before on the channel too, multiple times this season. So yeah, he definitely deserves a spot here. Hakati is another unit that deserves a spot here because she's a great counter pick into Immortality, into her reviving teams. The only issue is she's relatively slow. You kind of want to run her on Warfare set for her skill 3 to be up, but the great thing about Hakati is you can also pair her with Salome, and Salome can copy the Hakati and also nuke your opponent, but Salome typically is like 290, 300 speed, right? So you get the benefits of Hakati, but you also get the speed of something like Salome, right? Which is amazing. But yeah, Hakati, great unit. The only thing that she's kind of weak to is defense penetration resistance, so Empyrean Ilanov and stuff, but you'll notice that Empyrean Ilanov has also fallen from grace from past seasons, so Hakati does go a bit more unmatched in the current state of the game. Next up is going to be Saria. Saria is a great DPS for extra turn teams. RNL, Rinok, right? All these units, even Salome taking extra turns, right? So Saria can come in here and just really punish your opponent. She has increased hit chance on her damage attack. She has an AoE attack that really sweeps the field. Oh my god, her multipliers are crazy. But she also gives the whole team attack buff and invincibility, which also increases survivability for everyone too. So yep, solid unit overall. Definitely deserving a spot of a late pick. And then Landy as well. Now the problem with, not the problem, the thing with Landy is that she really punishes single target damage dealer teams, right? Things like Spirit Eye Celine, Tori, things like, well, what other single target damage dealers out there. There's a bunch of single target damage dealers out there, some of which who don't really make the tier list too, but yeah, Landy, I mean, you can also say like Boss Arunka teams, Estelle teams, they're all single target units that deal damage. If they're not picking like AoE damage like RB or Freerin, not picking too much fixed damage like Rinok, not too many AoE debuffers like Briarwitch, then Landy is super nice, right? If your opponent has like Boss Arunka, Estelle, Nurse Yoha, for example, maybe Disciplinary Prefect Arya, Landy can come in there and just sweep everybody. She gets a huge barrier. If you have her artifact maxed out, you get 100% stealth at the end of every turn. With that huge barrier that scales off of your attack, you can get a greater attack buff with her own artifact too, depending on the number of buffs your opponent has. Landy can just come in here every single turn, just spamming S3 after S3 after S3, and it can't be countered either, so she's really safe. Yeah. Been using her to great success this season. Don't see her as often as I would like, but she definitely gets the job done. Speaking of units that can just come in and sweep teams, Straze, also really good late pick for aggressive teams, right? If you're picking stuff like Ahmed and Brigitte, right? Another target besides Freerin is pushing up a Straze, giving that greater attack buff, and really coming in and sweeping the team with a skill 3, and then coming in with a skill 2. And if that wasn't enough, by the way, you can also use Salome to copy the Straze to do the exact same thing with another skill 3 and a skill 2. It's just crazy stuff. Or, well, it would just be a skill 3, but if you kill with the skill 3, Salome does get an extra turn, so she can rip her own skill 3 afterwards. Yeah, so just a ton of crazy stuff you can do with these DPSs nowadays. Same thing with Successor Teiyu. I'll throw him up here in the late pick category as well. Synergizes really well with Zio. If you ban protect Zio, which a lot of people do, then Successor Teiyu is actually really nice to come in. Shepherd the Dark Deanne a bit more situational nowadays, but Successor Teiyu can still defense break your opponent and just absolutely nuke them of really important key units. Highest damage dealer in the game, right? Most DPS in a single unit. So he can easily come in and just smack down pretty much anybody and one-shot them. Next up is going to be Tactical Archetype Coley. Going to throw her in here because she has a really good speed imprint, but also because she provides so much control and utility to the team, putting bombs and detonating them on her skill 3 onto the opponent. With the ability to run like 250, 300 effectiveness on her, she really gives people that are slower players a run for their money, right? Things like Disciplinary Prefect Arya can still get debuffed by Tactical Archetype Coley, which makes her a really decent option for faster teams. And as for slower teams though, Lone Crescent Bellona is going to earn her spot here, not as high up as RB or Setsuka, even though those are evasion units too. Lone Crescent Bellona just struggles a little bit too much, I would say, into things, so Abad Ludwig kind of dumpsters on her. She also is not that good into Tori. Tori can one-shot her as well, so the fact that she needs time to ramp up and things means that she can get countered by C-Fan and Politis, things like Elvira, so it's just not as she's just not as flexible of a DPS. Maybe early on in the season, right after she got her buff, she was really good, but now she's kind of fallen off, getting checked a bit more, I should say, by other units out there. Monarch of the Sword of Syria also going to deserve her spot up here because as a late pick unit, if your opponent doesn't really have too much burst damage, no actual real DPS units, right? Maybe they're running just like a Boss Arunka and they're hiding like some debuffers and Soul Weavers and stuff behind them. Monarch of the Sword of Syria comes in and just punishes everybody. Super hard. Weak to things like Arbiter Vildred and units that attack that don't have defense penetration, such as Tori. But yeah, Monarch of the Sword of Syria definitely deserving her spot here as a late pick unit. Lionheart Sirmia also going to be here because while you could say she's situational, I say she is actually a decent unit that I've used to pretty decent success. Again, this tier list is mostly based on my personal experiences in RTA. And so, yeah, I'd say Lionheart Sirmia has come up a couple of times where she is pretty clutch. A lot of random extra attacks, a lot of counter attacks that are happening in the meta right now. So she does have quite a few chances to proc. Really weak to control, like Numu Luna Seals, Witchmere Tenebria as well, just kind of locking her down and chipping away at her. So Lionheart Sirmia does have quite a bit of ways to play around, but in certain circumstances you can prevent your opponent from doing extra attacks or things like that. Like for example with RNL, if you have a Boss Arunka and they're attacking to Boss Arunka, you can really proc that Lionheart Sirmia early in the match and then nuke your opponent's squishier units down. Next up is going to be Amiki. Speaking of squishy units, Amiki is a great punisher for like debuff units and low DPS units, right? Also units that can't strip her buffs here. So with her immortality, with her counterattacks, with her fixed damage, Amiki actually is a pretty decent unit that I should be utilizing more myself, but I haven't really gotten around to re-gearing her fully. But yeah, really strong against squishy teams, against cleave teams and things, a great anchor for your team. I'm going to throw Empyrean Ilinov down here as well for a late pick. She's no longer one of the top knights in the game in terms of just drafting early in RTA, but still super solid, is a really good counter pick into things like Hakati, for example. Right? Or that's the main thing I've been using her into, is like Hakati or other units that do defense penetration. So she's pretty solid in that regard. Last Rider Crow also going to be here because he actually does have really strong barriers, and you can run artifacts on him that like counter Freerin, taking souls away from her whenever she does AoE attacks. So he's actually not that bad against like AoE focused teams. He's actually pretty solid. Just that he is kind of vulnerable to being controlled with debuffs and stuff. The fact that he buffs immunity and reduces your team's cooldown is really good, but keeping him alive is definitely kind of tricky. Next up, we have Genesis Raz. Gonna throw him here as a late pick. Man, he used to be up here, right? Also floating around the core picks, but now he's fallen as well, mostly because due to the rise of so many good damage dealers like Arbiter Vildred, for example, just kind of dumpstering on Genesis Raz. The rise of evasion with Setsuka and the ML Bologna here to counter him with injury as well. Super, super good. And of course, the anti-revives with things like Briarwitch just floating around randomly makes him much more difficult to use. But he's still really strong late game. Pairs well with Harsetti, pairs well with tankier teams. You can still nuke people, you can still seal people. Just really got to be mindful of when you draft him, because he is not an early pick anymore. Mort as well is also really good late pick with so many counterattacks going on. A lot of Boss Rukas on counter, Estelle's on counter, right? You can also prevent things like Spirit Eye Celine from countering, Arbiter Vildred from countering, Setsuka as well. So many units rely on counterattacks and stuff, and so Mort being a late pick, a lot of cases forces the opponent to ban him, right? Especially if they have something like a Monica the Sword of Syria, whose whole identity is countering, then Mort definitely shines there. Probably not going to make it through draft. Just keep that in mind, but definitely good to throw into a draft to make sure your opponent leaves the rest of your team for you to use. I'm going to throw APOC Ravi down here as well, and while I haven't really used her all that much myself, she is a really great unit because of her built-in defense penetration resistance, and that's mostly because, surprisingly, Notos. Now, I haven't really used her a lot myself, but Notos is a unit I pre-banned, so that's one of the reasons why. She has injury in her kit, she has the ability to revive units as well, she can tank Notos hits, which is actually pretty cool. If you pair her with things like Empyrean Ilinov, you might be able to survive Notos pretty decently, maybe get lucky with a Setsuka on the team as well, pretty decent stuff. Yeah, APOC Ravi, I would say is kind of underrated here, right? So, a decent niche pick. Next up is going to be Dark Corvus. Now you might be wondering, like, why is this guy here? Is he in a Guild War unit? He is, but in RTA, you can actually late pick him with things like Salome. So for example, you can throw in Hakati Dark Corvus with a Salome into things like a solo DPS Arbiter Vildred or any other kind of squishier unit, like anything 20k and lower HP. Hakati and Dark Corvus are guaranteed to like one-shot with a skill 3. Pair that with a Salome who can copy the Dark Corvus to rip a skill 3 at the start of the match, or rip a Hakati skill 3 at the start of the match. The fact that Dark Corvus inflicts extinction, the fact that Hakati also has a built-in anti-revive is just so strong. So Dark Corvus, yeah, he can eliminate pretty much anybody he wants with full defense penetration resistance, and his viability is due to in part because of Empyrean Ilinov's fall from the meta as well, so introducing him back as a late option. He also pairs really well into Harsetti, and I don't mean picking alongside Harsetti, which is an option, but into Harsetti teams, you can also pick Dark Corvus, because Harsetti introduces a lot of speed RNG, because everyone is going to be, like, pushed down in speed, 90% of Harsetti's speed, right? So a lot of units clumping together, and Dark Corvus, if he gets a lucky early turn, you can just nuke down anybody you want on your opponent's side, essentially making the whole match like a 4v3, right? So yeah, Dark Corvus, pretty decent to Harsetti, plus the fact that she always AoEs and has to attack him with that AoE attack means I can charge up relatively quickly for subsequent attacks too. Alright, that is going to be it for the A tier, guys. Now, going to the B tier with the situational units, we have Lone Wolf Peyra. Now, Lone Wolf Peyra has fallen from grace as well. You don't see her up here as popular as she once was, but I'd say Lone Wolf Peyra with the fixed damage that you can get from her skill 1, and the fact that her skill 3 is actually pretty decent in terms of cleansing the team and providing evasion, right, to some units like Arbiter Vildred, does warrant her place up here. It's not horrible. She can pair with things like Nurse Yoha too, providing some turn cycling. Nurse Yoha also tends to be running the Swift Flagbearer Cigarette artifact, right? So that allows you to gain combat readiness anytime someone skill 1s, and the fact that it gives you evasion means that Nurse Yoha, with the artifact and Peyra's buff, will have 40% evasion, which is pretty good. Couple that with Setsuka, that's like a 70% chance to evade. Nurse Yoha is going to be surviving a lot of things she probably shouldn't, but again, really situational. This is probably like once or twice a season type of match that you might see her pop up. Dragon King Shirun, I'm going to throw her down here. She is relatively like commonly seen, but I think her effectiveness is not as good as it could be. So she is in the situational category here. I did make her work a couple of times this season, but I think that's just really with luck against like you know, she's good at stopping like Swift Flagbearer Cigarette's fear, but if it's just with Flagbearer Cigarette, she can just not pop her skill 3, right? That's the main thing, is that your opponents aren't forced to use these control skills against you, so she is kind of easily played around. Dian's also going to be down here, not as good as Empyrean Ilanov for stopping defense penetration units, but sometimes Empyrean Ilanov's taken or banned because the opponent knows they want to pick things like Hakati, then Dian does come in kind of handy in those situations. She is very situational though, because your opponent could just have something faster than her, like a Salome, copy the Hakati and still nuke you before you can put up the defense penetration resistance buff anyway, so that is something to keep in mind. Fallen Cecilia is also going to be here. Now, she has the same passive as Maid Chloe, which reduces fixed damage by 50%. The only downside is that she is another knight, and she doesn't provide much utility to the team that other knights don't already do, right? Yeah, she provides a barrier and stuff, that's cool, but Estelle also provides giant barriers. Estelle has more damage share without using an Aureus artifact. Bossarunka protects the team much better, and Maid Chloe actually provides other things like revives, defense buffs, right? And the ability to cleanse the team, which Fallen Cecilia does not. So definitely a worse pick than Maid Chloe in a lot of circumstances where you need to mitigate that fixed damage. Ambitious Tywin I'm going to throw down here. I haven't really seen him this season, haven't used him this season, but he is in theory a decent option against some debuffers and openers, things like Fire Litica, for example, right? Not horrible. Compare well with things like Perfumer Bibulus. If you cleanse like the binds and stuff off of her, then it still allows her to proc and activate things. So very situational, but still going to be here because you might use him like once or twice in the season. Dragon Bride Senya I've actually fought a couple of times this season too. I picked her a couple of times as well. She's not horrible, but definitely not a unit that is super high priority in terms of building. Helps protect that backline unit quite nicely. People tend to focus her down first, but again, same thing with Estelle, right? Estelle just provides blanket protection, so if you're attacking things like Tori multiple times, then Estelle's going to counter multiple times, get that barrier up for the team, making Tori even harder to kill, and yeah, just kind of outclassed in a lot of cases. I'm also throwing Elvira down here. She is a great way to kind of counter your opponent if they pick both Lone Crescent Bellona and Setsuka together, right? If they're picking a bunch of Fighting Spirit units together, like Estelle, Setsuka, and like Lone Crescent Bellona, yeah, sure, throw in the Elvira, why not? Your opponent's probably just going to ban her here. But in a lot of cases, if your opponent's just picking one or two of them, Sea Phantom Politis tends to be a little bit better, a more flexible option. Elvira doesn't really do anything besides literally sit there and have 3 turns of immortality. She doesn't do damage, her debuffs kind of suck with Beguile and Provokes, which don't really do all that much. So she's kind of just a sitting duck, and it becomes a 3v4 kind of match. Whereas ML Politis is more active, supports the team with buffs, debuffs the opponent, so definitely a better pick. Fire Politis also going to be down here with Sage Ball. I'm also just going to throw Silverblade Armintha here. Kind of a debuffing trio. Politis and Sage Ball are more like anti-cleave, I would say. They're not great as anti-cleave because your opponent can probably bridge better than you can try to bridge with these 2 units' passives, but kind of discouraging non-attack skills from the opponent. Abyssal Crown is a great way to kind of throw out some stuns if you're lucky. Same thing with Sage Ball. You can, if you're lucky, hit your opponent, put them to sleep, maybe nuke somebody down if you get to cut them. And then Silverblade Araminta is more for the aggressive teams. Into slower teams like Bossarunkas, like into Estelles and stuff, you can throw out a bunch of burns for damage, a bunch of stuns as well. The initial attacks with Silverblade Araminta don't actually proc Estelle because they don't deal enough damage, and burn and detonation procs don't proc Estelle because that's not how her skill works. So a great way to kind of bypass a lot of mitigation units and deal a lot of damage to your opponent, right, while controlling them. I'm also going to throw Archdemon Shadow down here. I did use her a couple of times this season, and I did find her to be okay. In those instances, I would notice that my opponent bans New Moon Luna and are picking units with pretty strong passives. So picking things like Archdemon was really good for me. I think a couple of times I used her into like Spirit Eye Selene, for example, where they have like Christie in the backline, they have Spirit Eye Selene. As long as your opponent doesn't have immunity, you can Soul Burn your Archdemon, ignore the resistance, and then seal them, and then that allowed me to take out things like Spirit Eye Selene relatively easily, right? Because Christie is not a bad option to have. In fact, I would probably put her in the counter picks down here, but she's not really seen all that much. Okay, next up is going to be Lethe. Lethe is a unit that I don't personally use, but I've seen her used a couple of times. She takes a little bit too long to charge up, even though she does ignore res now with the frostbite and restricted stuff that she puts on her opponent as long as her HP is high enough. But she does take a little bit of time. Pairs really well with Salome, actually. Helps speed up the process of trying to finish off your opponent here. But again, defense penetration resistance, defense penetration skills mean that Empyrean Ilinov is a good counter pick into her, so just keep that in mind. Next up we have Argent Wave's Hua Young, also a really good unit, pairs really well with things like Aram here. Whenever you get that Vigor buff, you can also pair with Bunny Dom, get that Vigor buff and start attacking into your opponents. Pretty decent in some cases, but again, your opponent can sort of kind of play around her a lot of times, just by finishing her off because she's so squishy. Next up is going to be Summerbreak Charlotte. I think kind of one of the worst DPS bridges to be using. She is just outclassed in terms of damage from Successor Teiyu, and in a lot of cases, yeah, you'd much rather just like take Shepherd Dark DN, Successor Teiyu, or even I would say like a Commander Pavel, right? Who's coming up right here? I should just throw him here. Commander Pavel is also a unit that kind of gets outshined a little bit. He's okay, he's just hard to set up. You need to crit twice with your units, not on extra attacks, counter attacks, or dual attacks or anything. So RNL can technically proc him by herself, and then RNL, aside from RNL, you need something like a Zeo skill 1, like a crit Zeo, the Zeo skill 1 paired with like an Afternoon Soak Flan or something to push her up, then she attacks, then Commander Pavel goes, like that could be okay. But yeah, otherwise he's just harder to set up, that's why he's more situational. Afternoon Soak Flan is going to be here because she pairs well with Zeo. She also pairs really well with Harsetti, so don't forget that she exists, because she definitely ruins your day if your opponent ban protects a Harsetti and picks an Afternoon Soak Flan, and your entire team consists of stuff like RNL, like Rinok, right, like a New Moon Luna or something like that. They can just easily snipe down your team, and you're going to have a bad day. Sylvan Sage Vivian, speaking of debuffs and stuff, Sylvan Sage Vivian, kind of situational, like a really worse version of, like an AoE version of Tori. You're kind of immune to debuffs if you have 5 focus, right, or more than 3 focus, so you're gonna be okay in those cases. I think Tori's just a little bit better because you have so much single target burst damage to take care of the 1 or 2 DPSs that are going to be out there. In a lot of cases, the AoE from Sylvan Sage Vivian is not really necessary, but I can definitely see people like sometimes using her in place of Tori if you really value that AoE damage from her. Next up is going to be ML Shu. ML Shu is a great injury unit, but not too common, not a great common unit to see nowadays. She is decent into things like Genesis Ra. She's okay into stuff like Estelle too, but she kind of ramps up relatively slowly, and with so much kind of debuffs and AoE attacks like floating around, she becomes a little bit more vulnerable despite going into stealth. Still though, kind of good, kind of in the same boat as Landy, where if you can stay in stealth, you're going to be kind of protected and really good, but Landy just does so much more burst damage, and she's AoE, that it kind of puts Urban Shadow Shu kind of on the back burner, at least for me personally. Next up is going to be Zeno. While he does counter things like Setsuko on paper with his, decreasing the enemy evasion by 50%, it's still not good enough to warrant drafting him in a lot of cases. If you build him bulky, he lacks damage. If you build him with damage, he's like gonna get one shot by anything out there. So he is kind of difficult to use. Sometimes you'll be able to get to use him if your opponent's only running on like a Setsuka, and if you can finish her off and like then you win, then sure, you can kind of throw him in here. But other than those circumstances, which are really rare, not really gonna see too much play. Same thing with Celine, kind of situational, right? A lot of non-attack skill units out there, but depending on your EE, sometimes if you run the highest attack EE, attacking the person with the highest attack, you could snipe down like a really crucial pick, like the only DPS unit on your opponent's side. The only reason she's down here is because Frieren has built-in protection, Arby has evasion, Spirit Eye Celine can't take more than half her HP as damage, same thing with Tori, right? So you see what's happening, right? Bellona has evasion. It's just really hard to use the Celine properly. But hey, sometimes you can use her to snipe down things like Monarch of the Sword of Syria if you're cheeky enough. All right, next up we're gonna have Designer Lilibet. If your opponent's stacking a bunch of debuffs on you, Designer Lilibet's okay, especially into things like Witchdemir Tenebri and stuff, like Abad Ludwig. Now, Designer Lilibet cannot cleanse block or other debuffs off your teammates, but she can cleanse herself. And because your allies don't get cleansed, it kind of helps you a little bit, because then Designer Lilibet gains Fighting Spirit so quickly after every turn where someone goes, she'll just gain the Fighting Spirit and she'll keep lapping the opponent because you have so many debuffs on your team, and you'll be able to deal quite a bit of damage with her. So kind of a cheeky way to play around debuffs, but it's really risky as well. Next up is Little Queen Charlotte. Gonna throw her in here because I got absolutely demolished by one. She can bonk RB and she can bonk RNL. Just keep that in mind. She does a ton of damage. She does fixed damage as well, splash to everyone except her target that she hits. And she has Extinction. So definitely a unit that you definitely don't want to write off. I wrote her off in that match that I fought against one, and she punished me so bad, and it was awful. But definitely putting her down here for situational just because of that. And then we also have Bystander Hua-Young. Sorry, my Bystander Hua-Young. You're going to be down here mostly because she can't one-shot things anymore. She ignores damage share and stuff like that, but she doesn't one-shot Boss Arunkas, which are really, really popular. She can't really damage through Spirit Eye Celine, who's a direct counter to her. Can't damage Tori, who's a direct counter to her. Evasion really hurts her. Things like Arbiter Vildred, Lone Crescent Bellona, stuff like that. And Hua-Young cannot damage Frieren either. So you can see, yeah, she's in kind of a rough spot in which there's not many targets for her to really deal with, right? And then last few units here we have Abyssal Euphine, kind of the same boat as like Fire Politis, kind of stopping your opponent from gaining combat readiness and stuff, but she could act as a tank, could act as a DPS unit, could work decently with stacking a Fighting Spirit with like Monarch of the Sword of Syria or some other units, but again, not a very common thing to see. We also have Earth Yolha, which I actually found to be a pretty decent unit. Sometimes I pair Earth Yolha with Perfume and Biblis sometimes, especially when my opponent takes Boss Arunka and Estelle together, and then they pick like an RNL DPS. I'll just pick Perfume, Biblis, and Yolha, and when they skill through with the RNL, they just evaporate because of all the reflect damage that they're taking. So kind of funny to see. And we're also going to throw Crimson Armin down here. She was really good at one point as like a really tanky unit, but then Arwol got buffed, and then Arwol kind of just took her spot. So Arwol's just better in most cases. If you don't have an ROL, if you don't have Boss Arunka or Estelle, I guess you can try to throw in a Crimson Armin or something like that as a knight to mitigate some damage. She's just too slow at times, and you can't guarantee that she'll take a turn to get that invincibility and immunity up for your team. Last but not least, I'm going to throw in Twisted Eidolon Kayron into the mix. He is just kind of a worse version of Abad Ludwig. Ludwig is so proactive and Kayron's kind of reactive, but yeah, we'll throw him in situational because in some circumstances, he does have more bulk than the Ludwig, and he can actually provide some utility for your team in terms of injuring your opponent down and all that good stuff before detonating his fixed damage. But yeah, that is going to be my tier list, guys. Quite a long video, so I tried to keep it brief but also informative enough so you get an idea of why I placed the units where I put them. So if you guys are interested in more tier lists like this, let me know in the comment section down below. We can make this a regular seasonal thing with every RTA season to give you a breakdown of the meta so you can see what units to be prioritizing in terms of building or drafting. So with that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.